And hello, welcome once again to Podcast Beyond episode 659. I am Max Scoville, filling in for Jonathon Dornbush, who's having a lovely vacation. And it's been a cool minute since I hosted the show, so just bear with me. Joining me right now are my good friends Brian Altano.
Hello, Beyond.
And Tom Marks.
Hello.
Hey, how are you? How are you all doing?
Good.
Great.
Good.
Yeah. Good. I mean, yeah. I don't know what this is.
There's no good way to answer that question.
Yeah. No, it's been a year.
It's fine. Video games are keeping me sane. I'll put it that way.
No, I'm glad that there are still video games. I'm actually pretty excited. We got the PlayStation Plus games for August, and they are good ones, I think. It is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the campaign remastered, but more importantly, Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout, which is a battle royale game that's sort of like rooted in weird Japanese game shows, and you play as these little like bean people, and it's just Brian, you and I played this at E3 last year, and we loved it, right?
We were like crying laughing. It feels it feels a little battle royale and a little Smash Brothers-y, and also kind of a little Double Fine-y. You know, those are bad ways to describe things. Just putting the letter Y at the end of other words. But yeah, we had a blast with it. And I think that this is going to be, I don't necessarily know if this will be at the levels of something like Rocket League in terms of like being introduced on PS Plus and then reaching tremendously gigantic audiences. But I think it could get close. This game is already one of the top, if not the top streaming game in the world right now on multiple platforms, which is kind of incredible because it's beating out, you know, games that are, you know, big serious games that have been in development for a long time that have like lore, you know.
No, I'm glad you're not the only one. I'm not the only one who made the Rocket League connection, because like that was the first thing that came to mind, where like that is a game that probably would have, I mean, it's a good game, but I think it would have floundered if it hadn't had like a really big foot in the door to get people involved with playing this kind of weird idea for a multiplayer game. And with Fall Guys, like it is, you know, a battle royale, or like it is a battle royale, right? Like you're like they call it that. Yeah. But it requires enough people to play it for it to really be properly silly. Like it's not just like populating a lobby of, you know, 10 people. It's got to be like 100 little people out there falling all over which way.
The lobbies, they did a technical beta test this last weekend, and that's what it hit that huge streaming spike. And the lobbies, I think, are at 60 people. I played a few hours of it, and it's definitely a fun game. But I agree that the PS Plus sort of like angle is like the first time that I was really like, oh, this could get bigger, because I think this game is going to thrive off of novelty in a really, really real way. And like the developers have all these plans that are like, we're going to add new mini games, and we're going to update it. We're going to add randomization. We're going to add all this stuff. They've got a ton of plans. But like if it's the game, it's a type of game that runs the risk of like you play it for a weekend and then never go back to it. But if you're getting it free on PS Plus and they're adding stuff, like I'd totally come back to this game. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, no, totally. I was going to say, and we've seen obviously the sort of the chase to be the next top performing battle royale game, and for every 5 that have succeeded, 500 have failed. And the thing is, video games take a long time to develop. So it's difficult to sort of chase trends when it comes to stuff like that, because you can have your thing ready just in time for the trend to be over. But I think this one adds enough like weird, goofy newness to the table, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. And I think that's what helped something like Rocket League and Fortnite thrive, and that they became this sort of blank canvas for wacky ideas and creativity. Sony announced in May that there was something like 42 million PlayStation Plus subscribers, and so 42 million people are going to get this game for free. And even if a fraction of them download it and play it opening weekend, like that's a huge influx of people trying this game out for the first time. So it's super cool.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I just like you mentioned this. There's so many, like there's a veritable battle royale games out there, but most of them are about trying to be really good at the game. Like they're about survival of the fittest, and this is like kind of about like everyone kind of sucks. Like you can win, but there's this like level of chaos that I really adore, which I think Rocket League kind of had going for it too. And obviously a lot of people got stupidly good at that game against all odds, and were like doing car flips and knocking the ball around every which way. But like I kind of love the sort of like the WarioWare kind of chaos element to this, where it's just maybe you win by accident, you know?
Yeah, I brought up Smash Brothers before, which is not an entirely fair comparison because Smash Brothers is a game where, in the professional sense, almost all of the randomization has been completely whittled off to create something that is hyper focused on specific parameters, almost specifically a similar group of characters, final destination, no items. Fall Guys is different because it sort of thrives in its chaos, in the way the levels will decide to just suddenly totally screw you over, and that's part of the fun to it. And I think like Fortnite has a little bit of that element, but even that is such a controlled experience. Like you're watching that fog of war close in around you, but for the most part, like you run to get your weapons, you have like all of that is all about preparation and then execution. Fall Guys is they just drop you in, and it's this madness, and it's really, really funny. And I implore all of you with PlayStation Plus, even those of you that don't, check this game out because I think
it might be the next big esport. I'm into it. No, I mean there's that classic thing of like, easy to learn, difficult to master, which I would say Fortnite is, and so then something like this seems more like difficult to learn and absurd to master. Like another one that did this really well was Duck Game, which was like a wonderful just nonsense party game where like it would just like have a random level where like the entire floor is made of balloons and the only weapon is knives, and you just be like, well, everyone dies now. Like, haha, yeah. The joke is on you.
You never hear anyone say that wasn't fair.
It's got some of the same appeal as like Gang Beasts in that way.
Yes,
too.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, Gang Beasts with like 60 people playing at once, yeah. I don't know. I think we need a little bit of chaos and absurdity. So in other news, speaking of colorful cartoon characters coming to PlayStation 4, we got a nice surprise this morning that Cuphead is out now on PlayStation 4. This game that was originally on Xbox One, wonderful kind of classic sort of 1930s hand-drawn, punishing as hell platformer, which has since been put on Switch, and is that on? Did they talk about putting that on Tesla? Did I dream that?
Yeah.
So it came to a car before coming to PlayStation.
Yeah, but it's a really expensive car though.
Yeah, that's weird. Anyway, what are your guys' thoughts on Cuphead?
I mean, it's hard to be anti-Cuphead. I feel like that game is just so charming, right? I mean, that's one of the things that I think is so impressive about Cuphead and stays impressive even after however many years it's been out, is the way that game looks is unlike any other video game ever, right? It is so incredible in the way that it recreated 1930s sort of cartoon aesthetic, in the audio, in the look, in the character design, the movement. Like everything is so spot on, and it means that game is going to be timeless, whether it's a few years after it's come out like now, or we're going to be looking at Cuphead in 20 years and going, man, that game still looks incredible, right?
Yep.
And as a result, like it can come out kind of as a surprise on PS4 and just be like, oh, this is still really exciting that people who haven't been able to play this are going to get their butt handed to them by a mean flower in this game again. Like it's awesome.
No, I dig this game. I think my apprehension with it is that it is fundamentally more of a shmup than it is a platformer. Like it's more of a bullet hell, and I love bullet hells, but it's like when I sit down ready to play a platformer, even like a brutally difficult one, there's a mindset that goes into that. And with this game, it's really less about sort of like jumping over pits and more about memorizing bullet patterns. So yeah, if you're for the uninitiated who skipped this because it hasn't come to PlayStation yet, this game's awesome. It's just go in knowing that it's not really like a Super Meat Boy style twitchy platformer, and more of a bullet hell. But I think you'll dig it.
It's got some Mega Man in there too, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah, for sure.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that it's a boss rush game, but then it's got these platforming sections, but the platforming sections are A, really uncommon, like there aren't that many of them in the game, and B, they are as hard as the bosses, right? Like they are these brutal challenges, just in a sort of different form. So I totally know what you're talking about, Brian. It's not really like a platformer. It's just it's a side-scrolling, or it's like a platformer bullet hell in like it's a weird fusion of those. But so I agree. You got to be you kind of have to go into it with the right mindset, or you run the risk of that thing where you go in, it's totally not what you're expecting. It kicks your butt and you're just like, I'm done with this.
Yep. No, I mean, when I first saw screenshots for it, I was like, wow, what a brilliant art direction. Like, this is so cool. And then I was also kind of like, I don't want to look at it anymore because like, I want to actually play this game running on my TV, like, and like, it looks like one of those like weird warped old, like Merry Melody cartoons. And then once I actually played it, I was like, oh, this is not really much of a like Super Mario Brothers hop and bop. But I still dig it for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those games that brings me back to being like a little kid and just, sucking at a game, but really wanting to like it. And I haven't really given Cuphead like a fair shake on my own, but I know that I'm just like, I'm not good at really like carefully timed rhythm stuff, whether that be platforming or rhythm games or, bullet hell. Like I like when there's that margin of like kind of creative gameplay, I guess, which is, it's more about like trying to like, navigate a very tight window of success. But
I think they added some like easy mode stuff to this game for people who just want to see how beautiful it is and not get totally punished.
Yeah, I might mess with that. I was going to try to play it on Tesla, but I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of difficulty in games, Ghost of Tsushima got a new patch, I believe late last night or early yesterday morning, something like that. It is patch 1.05, which brings a new lethal difficulty to the game, as well as some accessibility options that will lower the intensity of combat. So if you are, not super akin to doing carefully timed dodges and whatnot, and you just want to enjoy this beautiful samurai world, that's an option. And if you're a glutton for punishment, want to get stabbed in the head more often, that also does that. So that's good news.
One of the good things they did here too, in terms of accessibility, was they upped the percentage of the font size in everything to 150%. If you have an option for that now, that was like really, really difficult to read, even like on a big TV, and I have perfectly fine vision. I mean, I wear glasses here and there, but yeah, like that was one of the things I saw some people tweeting about, and I'm really glad they changed that. In terms of like accessibility, I think The Last of Us 2 still has it beat this year, but the fact that this game's only been out for a few weeks and they're already doing this is really nice. There's also different color emblems you can decide for subtitles as well. So to kind of work with color blindness. I like that this has already become a living, breathing thing for them. They're going to keep adding stuff to it. I'd like to see them add like a new game plus down the line. The thing I've seen a lot of people requesting, which I totally agree with, is a sort of Far Cry style system that will let you reboot all of the bases that you have to, the sort of Mongol forts that you take over, because those are so much fun. And I love clearing those out. And I would totally jump back in and play a bunch with like different parameters or something, or like those little sort of like micro challenges they gave you with those, like kill an enemy from above, or like, kill 3 people without being seen. Just like cycling through those at random and throwing
that'd
those.
Be fun.
Yeah, that'd be really fun. So I'd like to see that, because like, to be honest, I don't think we're going to see another Sucker Punch game for like 5-6 years at the absolute earliest. Maybe we'll see like a Miles Morales style, like spin-off DLC thing for Ghost, but in the next 3 or 4 years. But I think these guys take their time, but they have something awesome here, and I really enjoyed it. I played it for 60 hours, and I'd love to go back and do more. And so yeah, more accessibility stuff and more new game plus stuff. More let me reboot the forts.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm still chipping away at it. I just got to little ways into Act 3 this morning. I had a stupid, I don't think I've been on the show since I did this. I was on like a sponsored day one launch live stream for it. And they were like very specific of like when in the game they wanted us to be playing. They were like, don't go too far. Maybe just start when you first get out in the open world. And like, I was already probably, a dozen hours past that. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll just make a new save. And I proceeded to save over my own file, which was first of all annoying. Because then I had to go and redo a bunch of stuff and unlock a bunch of points. But then jumping back into an early part of that game, when you've already gotten accustomed to having like your sort of existing tool set of like your attacks and everything, is just like, it's like playing with one hand tied behind your back. And I was just like, I was hitting buttons that didn't do anything because I'd forgotten that I hadn't like unlocked that. And it's like, I feel like when that game really ramps up, the combat is is so much fun. And when you really like learn how to just like, when you know what you're doing in an outpost, you've got all your like gizmos and gadgets and you're ready to just like, stealth your way in and then just get loud when you feel like it. It's great. And then, but it's like having that suddenly stripped away is like, crap, I forgot how to do anything, which is, like a New Game Plus would be fun for that, to kind of go back to those earlier parts and just do them totally differently.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe let us skip cutscenes if we've already beaten the game.
Yeah, that was definitely a big thing that bothered me. It's also, I don't know, there's such a totally like antithesis of just being like, hey, it's a huge open world game. You can go and explore and be isolated and on your own, but also like do not interrupt someone while they're talking. Like you got to follow them on this nature walk.
It's rude. I will say too, if you missed it last week, or if you're waiting to watch it because you haven't finished the game yet, friendly reminder that Jonathan Dornbush and I interviewed Jason Connell, the art and creative director on the game, and we got to really dig into like a bunch of super geeky making of stuff, which is like my favorite thing in the world to talk about. Just like stuff that almost made the cut in the game, and stuff that was scrapped from very early on. A bunch of weird ideas they like, why they went back and forth on lock on and stuff like that. Just super, super cool stuff. How they came up with the whole wind concept. Like, yeah, one of my honestly favorite, like sort of like behind the scenes style interviews we've done in a while here on Beyond. So go check that out. Bookmark it when you're done with the game, because it's a little spoilery.
That's so cool. Like one of the worst things about I guess this field, this job that we do, is that so often we interview people before the thing they're making is out, and we don't get a chance to actually talk about it, knowing what it is. And it's like, we'll be interviewing, somebody about their movie that you haven't seen yet, or the game that isn't out yet, or that people haven't beaten yet. And it's like, it's so much more interesting to like pick something apart and be like, yeah, I got a question. Why'd you do that? And they're like, here's why we did that. And this is, so it's, I'm so happy you guys got to do that.
Longtime fans of Beyond will appreciate that one of Jason's favorite games on PlayStation is Bloodborne. So
Bloodborne's a good game. More people should play Bloodborne.
Just felt like I should say
that. So this is weird. Ghost of Tsushima is definitely like giving me some Red Dead vibes, which makes sense because it's a very filmic samurai game, and the whole Kurosawa spaghetti western connection is prevalent. And I've been sort of almost tempted to go back into Red Dead, and they have made an update to online that actually definitely makes me want to go back into Red Dead, which is called the Naturalist update, which has a bunch of just exotic animals roaming the land, and you team up with like this science person, and they have you going with like a tranquilizer gun and shooting the animals, making them go to sleep. And then you take their blood, and then you use the blood to make all sorts of tonics, and you can get like weight loss tonics or weight gain tonics if you just want to like do weird stuff to your body, a la San Andreas, I guess.
We're here. We're in that. We're getting into those deep waters where Rockstar gets weird with their big ass games. A couple months after launch.
I love that they do that.
This is like one step short of like Witcher tonics, right? In Red Dead, where it's like, oh, you got to take down that grizzly bear, and then you'll get bear claws when you drink its blood. Like we're like maybe a few months away from that.
It was like all the peyote animal tripping stuff from GTA, where like they're like, you can be a monkey now in your dreams. Like I love that so much because they're like, it's a gritty crime story, and a couple months later they're like, don't worry about it.
That's not even touching what they were. Sorry, go ahead.
I said now there's like flying cars in that game.
I know.
Yeah. The stuff. And the stuff that happened in like, I hope that they dip into like hypothetical machinery of the like start making like Jules Verne airships or like penny farthing bicycles. Like that would be so much fun in that. And I could also see them doing it.
It's especially interesting with Red Dead Online too, because when they did that with Red Dead Redemption 1 with the zombie DLC that they made, and then like you try to think about what that DLC looks like in the modern day with Red Dead 2, because Red Dead Redemption 1 didn't have like this Red Dead Online sort of like base that then GTA 5 made so successful with GTA Online. And now Red Dead has Red Dead Online. And so now something like that zombie DLC would find its home in Red Dead Online as an update or as like a paid thing rather than like a single player DLC.
Right.
So now we're going to get weird things like zombie updates just in online, probably, right? Like eventually they're going to hit that.
we did I think we did one Let's Play in Red Dead Online that I don't even know if it ever went up, but it was just us we were like wrestling on a roof and like lassoing each other and just being incredibly stupid with it. It was when it had sort of like first launched, I think. And I don't know, I kind of want to jump back in there because like I just that world is so cool when you're kind of like on your own schedule. I think I kind of soured myself on the main game by trying to like burn through it too fast, as I'm prone to do. But this is so in addition to the Marie, who is the sort of Harriet Davenport, who is she's the scientist who's she's like, I want to protect these animals, but also can you go bring me their blood? There's also a big game hunter named Gus McMillan who will pay a generous fee for the pelts of the rare animals, but you have like a kind of ethical dilemma of like, do I shoot the animals and kill them and take the pelt? Or do I go and take their blood and in a much kinder way? But there's also, yeah, right. Like, why not just play both sides of the field there? But there's also, they've added a little bit of Pokemon in the Red Dead. There's an animal field guide where you can basically go around and document all the animals you've seen. And they've added a bunch of like new legendary animals. And there's also, there is an advanced camera, which I feel like does that game have like a proper photo mode? I don't think it does. Does it?
Yeah.
Did they add that?
It does. Yeah.
I know they gave you like an old timey camera where if you if you lined it up and it wasn't at night, you could take a blurry photo of yourself. But like,
I think that's the photo mode.
Yeah. It's like,
I think there's a full on photo mode in this game.
Oh damn. Okay. Well, yeah, that shows what I know. But yeah, like I don't know. I love that.
It is a PC exclusive feature.
Oh well, so that's why I never saw it. But yeah, that would be kind of right. That's first of all, that's such a gorgeous game and should have that. But I do love that they're like, you just do ye old Pokemon Snap. You can just wander the realm and just like take pictures of animals. I don't know. I just appreciate that it's like, yeah, this was a cowboy game when it started out, but now it can be like you're just a naturalist. We started talking about this. There's a YouTube video from Sonny Evans, which is called "Can You Walk a Bowl of Stew Across the Map in Red Dead Redemption 2?" And it is one of my favorite things that anyone's done with a video game in probably like 5 years. But yeah, Tom, basically these two guys were like, they figured out that as a challenge, like if you can carry a bowl of stew around, and you just pull it out in Red Dead Online, but it's very easy to spill it. And they were like, let's see if we can walk it all the way across that gigantic map. And so they started taking on these challenges, and they realized that there's all these weird like metaphysical stew problems where like if you reach a certain point, the stew just vanishes. And so it's these two buddies on this like ridiculous journey to try to carry the stew. And it's just, I don't know. It's just
will pop out. There's random strangers that might bump into you. And if they bump into you, you drop the stew. And like, it's a whole thing.
Like if you touch a cactus, you just like fall over and like you get the stew everywhere. And it's just like that. And the puke. You guys know about the puke thing?
No.
So people figured out there's like a tonic you can drink that makes you puke on the spot, but they figured out that if you do it on the top of a bridge and then fall off the bridge, the puke will act like a bungee. Yeah, it makes like a puke rope. Because like in the video game logic, that puke, you were vomiting to that one spot on the bridge, and if you jump off the bridge, it has this like physical elasticity to it. So you just like barf your like Spider-Man barf. Like
we have a lot of videos to send you, Tom.
Yeah. Seriously, jeez.
So I don't know. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that makes me want to jump back into Red Dead Online.
This is also the kind of things where like you think about the job of a QA tester, and anytime somebody's like, "How did they miss that bug? How could they?" Is like, well, you didn't really expect someone to puke and then jump off a bridge, did you?
I love that so much.
Case.
All right, so. While we're on the subject of things people are doing in games that came out a whole long time ago, I have some great news, guys. Nuclear disarmament has finally happened on the PlayStation 3 version of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. If you recall,
like, legitimately?
Legitimately.
Okay.
Not like accidentally because there were too many nukes as what happened previously. So if you're unfamiliar, there was a whole arms race in that game where players would basically given the opportunity whether or not they wanted to generate nuclear weapons on their own respective mother bases, or if they wanted to disarm them or whatever. And the whole idea being that there was the secret cutscene that would only play if everybody who was playing the game got rid of their nukes. So if everyone just completely got rid of the nukes entirely, and of course that basically didn't happen for a cool minute. Actually, this cutscene I think rolled by accident a few years ago. because there were too many nukes on the server and it like rolled over to 0, or like it basically like they overloaded it or something, which is
just like the real world.
Yeah, it's like the opposite. It was like a nuclear winter type of thing. But players on PlayStation 3, which I'm guessing probably had the smallest player base of, or maybe just the most active still in that corner, but
probably both.
Yeah, they did it. They did it. They got it. They got the nukes all gone, and this cutscene rolled authentically for real. And yeah, so that's one of those weird little Kojima things that like it took what is that? That game came out almost 5 years. Almost like 5 years to do this thing in an online game. I don't know. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, good thing to celebrate.
Reminds me of the Nobi Boy ending, right? Where they had to like play a certain amount to get like Nobi Boy all the way to Pluto and back. And by the time that they actually did it, Pluto wasn't a planet anymore or something like that. Like, it was something really sad like that.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I love when devs do that, when they put these just far away stretch goal sort of things of, you know what, maybe this will never happen, or maybe the community will do it 10 years from now if everything is still working out. Like, I think that's great.
I mean, that's what I was really hoping for with Death Stranding, and I feel like so much of the core gameplay was kind of hinged on that, but it was kind of more straightforward, I guess. Like I haven't really seen any strange like I haven't seen that community digging into that game and finding any like surprising, shocking Kojima-esque secrets, which I was hoping we would following, you know, stuff like Phantom Pain and PT. But yeah, speaking of PT, there was a bit of a kerfuffle. There was some news flying around with an interview with the sort of legendary horror manga artist Junji Ito, who at one point was attached to working on PT or Silent Hills, and he said in an interview that let me get the phrasing of this right. But before you get excited, they did an update and basically, no, he's not working with Kojima. There was a he made an offhand comment that, of course, everybody blew out of proportion and got very excited about the idea of them working together on a new horror game, which Kojima has said he wants to, you know, work on for his next game probably. But
yeah, there was all those he was like, Kojima wrapped on Death Stranding, and I believe the PC announcement happened, and then he started sort of doing his Kojima thing where he was vaguely tweeting out like movies and stuff, but a lot of them were horror. But it was also him being like, horror is so spooky. I'm so scared of all these spooky horrors. I can't wait to make something spooky horror. And I've been on like a massive Junji Ito kick this year. I think I've like literally read every single one of his compendiums this year because it's a bleak year and why not? And so this sucks. Like I was super excited about that. His exact quote is from Junji Ito. He says, in a past interview, I said casually that I received an offer from Mr. Kojima, but in reality, it was a remark made at a party where he said, if there's an opportunity, I may ask for your help. I apologize to Mr. Kojima and to all the fans to whom I may have given false hope. Yeah, dude, that's me. I'm super bummed about that. I love Kojima. I wasn't crazy about Death Stranding. I loved the art direction of it. I loved the world. I think just the moment to moment didn't really grab me as much as I wanted it to. But I appreciate that it was doing its own thing for sure. But him going full horror, I mean, Death Stranding is the result of Silent Hills spinning off into, you know, the failed Kojima experiments, Konami experiments that then all collapsed. And so from the ashes of that, we got Death Stranding, and I would like to see from the ashes of that bring us an actual survival horror game. I think he was really onto something there, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I would just love to see Junji Ito working on a game. I think he has worked on a game, maybe, or like bits and pieces, but really just getting like the Silent Hills was so almost that. Like it wouldn't surprise me in the least if they were like, if Kojima was like, hey, my next project is horror. We've got Junji Ito drawing some horrifying toilet monsters that you're gonna
have some good news for you though, because if you're a big fan of Junji Ito and seeing his creations come into the live action form, he's working on something for Quibi, where all the stuff you love goes to die.
Oh man,
you remember Quibi? Yeah.
Good. Why do we always have to talk about Quibi?
I don't want to talk about Quibi. I would rather this was just literally anything else.
Yeah.
Not talking about Scoville anymore.
I don't even know how to segue to this, but here's a weird one. We've all been sort of talking about the next Call of Duty game and how it's probably going to be another Black Ops and maybe about the Cold War because of the sort of hints that have been found in Warzone. And then we got a big fat reveal in the form of a bag of Doritos where the logo for Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War has been shown on the bag of Doritos where you can unlock double XP for a year. So
was it really that big fat of a reveal if the bag was fat, but it was 80% air?
Hey man, that's so your chips don't get crushed, okay? That's
I love about this. Yeah, sure. That's their bank accounts don't get crushed. What's hilarious about this franchise is that like there's always that moment at the beginning where they're like, we consulted real war veterans and soldiers and stuff like that, but then like Doritos or Mountain Dew is always the one that leaks the actual game. But
yeah, and this got as Max kind of mentioned briefly, there was a leak that Cold War was maybe going to be it from some Call of Duty leaker back in May, I think it was. And at that time, Eurogamer sort of reported that they had heard similar things from sources, essentially confirming the leak from their sources, although we still don't have official confirmation. So, don't take anything as gospel at this point. I think the back of a bag of Doritos is potentially the easiest thing in the world to fake, but also we don't really have a reason to think it is fake.
Yeah.
The most sort of like interesting nugget that came out of this, the most interesting cheese dust covered nugget, is that the promotion was supposed to start. Supposedly, this promotion on the Doritos bag is supposed to start on October 5th. And end on January 31st. And if you look at the previous Call of Duty games Dorito promotion, because this is the world we live in, it started on October 1st, and then the game came out late that October. So you can draw conclusions if you think this thing is real that probably we're looking at another late October Call of Duty release. But again, that is sort of like saying,
you mean to tell me
come up tomorrow?
You mean to tell me they're going to put out a Call of Duty game this holiday season?
I mean, it's a guess. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just think it's always funny when obviously they're going to make another Assassin's Creed or another Call of Duty, but it's always funny when it like shows up and it's like, hey, somebody left this box of keychains open on the floor and we saw the name of the new Assassin's Creed, or like, oh, this person on the flight next to me had their laptop open, or hey, these Doritos spoiled a secret. Like, I don't know. It sounds
like you just made 3 things up, but those are all true.
They're all real. Yeah.
Yeah. That's. I mean, Assassin's Creed for the fact that that's a series about like secret covert societies, and it's practically every game has been spoiled in like increasingly absurd fashions is just beautiful.
Yeah, even the new one got leaked, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What did that get?
Always.
And people weren't even getting on planes.
You know what?
Yeah.
You know what? Did you hear what
leaked
I called
from home?
I said we should stop calling game leaks and just start calling them Ubisoft launches.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Nice.
I don't have a dog in this race because I don't really care, but or I don't have a chip in this bag. But I do want to put it out there before this goes on to become the first or second best-selling game of 2020. The Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War is a stupid name for a video game.
The whole point of the Cold War is that there was no war. I don't understand how they're going to have a Call of Duty game in the Cold War.
But Black Ops Cold War, it just sounds like Paul Blart Mall Cop or something like that. It's just like 4 short, dumb words glued together to make one longer thing. I would rather play Call of Duty Paul Blart Mall Cop, but
I hope they do an entire Doritos map. I hope they finally show us what's going on in that cooler ranch.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to. Yeah.
That said, though, like I said, my opinion is worthless because this game will sell 11 million copies, and it'll be one of the best-selling. This will be the first, premier next generation Call of Duty game. It doesn't matter what you call it. Literally, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
that silence was just like palpable.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That's sort of it. Like people who like get mad or argue about like Call of Duty or whatever. Like there's always this like weird, back and forth about the newest one, they ruined this, and then it just sells like incredibly well, and it's kind of like, what do you do? Like, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. So yeah, Call of Duty continues to come out, and other video games continue to get canceled before they even get announced or officially whatever. Our pal Jason Schreier, who does all sorts of deep dive muckraking in the world of games journalism, did a whole thing on how
Call of Duty deep dive muckrake.
I can't believe they nerfed the muckraker. That was my favorite AR.
Legend of Zelda muckraker.
God damn it. Anyway, so Ubisoft was apparently working on a King Arthur game that was going to be helmed by Mike Laidlaw, who was known for being one of the main designers of the Dragon Age video game series. And I guess he got scooped up by Ubisoft in late 2018 or so, and everyone sort of was wondering what he was working on, and then I think he just went his separate ways. But according
a year later,
he left a year later, and nobody knew why, and it was very sort of like, this is okay, sure, that's weird.
Yeah, according to Schreier's story, Serge Haskowit, I'm saying that name probably wrong, who's one of the sort of chief creative officer at Ubisoft, who calls shots on big stuff like that, allegedly pulled the plug on what would have been a King Arthur game. Which, what's your internal barometer on King Arthur, Tom?
I mean, I don't have the most loved King Arthur thing is like the Sword in the Stone animated movie from Disney years ago. But I think it's an interesting sort of like not very well explored territory in terms of video games, right? Like you had tons of fantasy games, obviously, but like that myth and that sort of story specifically, and I know, myth, I'm using that term loosely, however you want, hasn't really been explored. So I think it would be there's definitely like fertile ground there. It's a really interesting report from Schreier out of Bloomberg too, just like in the way that it sort of talks about it, that this guy who canceled it basically had oversight on like what the report is saying is that supposedly he basically had oversight on every game Ubisoft makes. And the reason you might think that Ubisoft games in recent years all feel similar is because they were all going through one dude and he was canceling the ones that seemed too different, is basically what it alleges. You also got, after this Bloomberg report came out, some Ubisoft developers or other people quote tweeting Jason Schreier being like, hey, I worked on this. It was a real bummer when it got canceled, right? So there was clearly like excitement for it within the team. And also, if this story is true, then that's probably why Mike Laidlaw left, right? Is because the game he was working on got canned. So it's like a really weird sort of, it's a very relevant story in the context of what's happening at Ubisoft right now, where they're taking really hard looks at both their leadership and the calls that they've been making, and also the diversity of their games and the diversity of their editorial team in terms of like what different types of experiences they're making and representing. And so, yeah, it's just like a very fascinating thing to hear about.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be remiss to not mention that this is like a video game related news story that came what is from essentially the fallout from the sexual assault allegation stuff that's happening over there right now, which is deep and disturbing and involves dozens of people, if not more. And so, we are getting little details like, Assassin's Creed almost had an only female playable character until someone said no. And, they canceled this King Arthur game. But the bigger picture here is that, there was a lot of sort of systemic sexual assault and basically sexism happening at Ubisoft as a whole. Not saying every single person was involved. Obviously, all of us have worked with men and women at that company who, are good people from what we know. But yeah, understand that when you're reading these stories, that this is something that kind of spun out from a lot of people talking in unison. But yeah, it does seem like at this company and a lot of other companies, there were sort of like very toxic people at the top that not only enabled bad behavior from people underneath them internally, but also halted sort of creativity and experimentation within game development itself. And so you're not only holding people back, socially and assaulting them sexually. You're also, punishing them creatively, and I think that created a very toxic and also stagnant workplace for a very long time there. And I really hope that's something they can pull out of, because they're a massive global studio with hundreds of people working there, and they have some phenomenal artists and animators and actors and actresses and writers.
That's a huge company. Like I think it's very easy to sort of look at, the handful of games they put out every year and be like, oh, this crap again, same old. And it's like, that's made by like thousands of people, it's very hard to sort of pinpoint like where that comes from. But I don't know. It's just, it's also very easy to look at a few sentences describing a game that almost was and be like, that sounds like it would have been awesome. And it's like, well,
right.
It could have been a complete wreck too, but it regardless is interesting to hear about it. The game would have been called Avalon, and they said it would have been sort of similar to Monster Hunter.
Yeah, co-op multiplayer King Arthur RPG inspired heavily by Monster Hunter is what Sure tweeted at one point, which is like wild to think about, because I'm a huge Monster Hunter fan, so that, like, what even would a medieval King Arthur Monster Hunter game look like? Like going out and slaying dragons? Like I
mean, maybe like that gets me sort of like, I mean, that kind of tantalizes my brain, because I'm kind of wondering what kind of like bizarre creatures could they go with in a setting like that. Like I've never been the biggest fan of the King Arthur stuff. I feel like a lot of it's a little too sort of polished and valiant for an era where everybody probably smelled bad and was pretty dirty. And so,
well, it's a weird one, because we haven't really seen it in video game form. We've seen like all sorts of kind of royalty free fantasy and medieval, Western fantasy stuff. But King Arthur is one of those. I don't even, if he knows it counts as a franchise. It's basically just it's a old enough concept or myth that you can pretty much do it royalty free. And like in the last 5 years, we got the King Arthur movie. Or it was I think, was it Guy Ritchie who did that? It was like a weird like modernized version. And there's also The Kid Who Would Be King, which was the guy who did Attack the Block, doing this kind of kids interpretation of it. And it's, I don't know, like it's kind of up there with sort of like Tarzan or Robin Hood, where it's like you can make these, but does it resonate? Like, do people go for it, or is it sort of too old and dusty to really get that reaction?
I do think there's something there. I think that I think a developer will tackle that at some point and figure out what it looks like. I'm not super interested in like multiplayer RPG stuff. But if that could have been an idea for a game I could have soloed, and it was a little FromSofty in terms of armor and enemy
well, see, there you go. You're
approach.
making up what the game would have been based on like a handful of sentences, and it's fun to imagine that. It's fun to think like what that could have been. It could have also just been like like a kind of copy paste Monster Hunter knockoff with just different art direction. But right,
and that's I think I might have said this on the show last week even, is that like for every one game you hear about that got canceled, there's a dozen more you didn't, right? And there's a dozen canceled games that we know nothing about and don't necessarily want or need, and there's no reason to put the one we did hear about on a pedestal necessarily.
I think with this one specifically, it's like you bring in this talent video game designer,
right,
who has a great pedigree, and sort of saddle him for a year and then let him, and then he leaves. Like I think that's
huge disappointment.
Like that's the bummer to me about this story, because like obviously in development they're throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And there's I've read so many stories of devs, like heartbreaking stories of devs who have pitched games to studios using an IP that the studio owns and being like, hey, here is your mock Metroid game, and then Nintendo goes, no thanks, or like hey Sony, here's a version of Ape Escape that we want to do, and someone's like, no thanks. Like that's a bummer to hear about that.
It's the same. I would say with movies where like these are you look at games or big budget movies where like this is entertainment and this is art, but it's also a business, and that they cost so much money to make that if they're not if they don't return what was put into them, it's cataclysmic for a company. And I think that there's extremely rigid, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or like don't color outside the lines, like don't don't spend millions of dollars experimenting and trying something that isn't like proven to work. And like you look at sort of Ubisoft games have that kind of, oh, it's an open world game where you maybe climb some sort of tower to unlock sections of the map, and then you go do main story missions, but also optional outposts, or like you find collectibles. And it's like these are things that have sort of been, it's demonstrated that they work, and the games that have them in there sell millions of copies. And it's like, why would you throw that out? Why would you try something completely new?
Yeah, but the thing that bugs me at least is that Ubisoft sort of they sort of acknowledged that has limitations with when they took a year off Assassin's Creed and they came back with Origins, and it was so different, and it got such a positive reception, and that was in 2017, I think. So
well, then the thing that happened since then was they put out Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands, which was like a huge hit. People loved that, and then they were like, okay, and now we're back with Breakpoint, which just was like a huge flop, like just a complete, like that completely just. Yeah, and it seemed like they were really trying to just, I guess, do things right from the get go. Like the way they announced it seemed really transparent and really community driven. But I think there was, a lot of microtransactions and stuff in there, and a lot of just kind of a loot grind that didn't, wasn't supported by a game. I think like I wasn't super close in on that, but yeah,
I think what's interesting too is that like if you look at the sales of Ghost of Tsushima, it's the fastest selling new IP on PlayStation, and I think it absolutely sort of revisits a lot of the original roots of what made us love Assassin's Creed to begin with, and builds upon them in a completely new direction. But it is like quintessentially kind of old school Assassin's Creed in a lot of ways. And I really dig it for that. And people love that game right now. And I think that like that really shows that there's a testament to revisiting that concept. And I think with Ubisoft specifically, they ran it into the ground. And there were some years where we were getting like multiple Assassin's Creed games. Like the year we got, what was it, 3? And then also a new one on Vita. Like there were, side stories and mobile games and handheld games and comics, and it was just like kind of this oversaturation. And the issue too was that so much of it connected back to this concurrent lore that took place in the modern times that the audience was, I want to say, divisive on. It seems like every time you talk to people about it, they're like, keep the Animus crap out of here. And then they made a bad movie that was just like, they were like, we're going to put as much Animus in there as we can. Are you right, guys? And we're like, no. And so I think that like, there was franchise fatigue with that, but I don't think that the core concept of what it's like to explore a world like that is something that we're tired of. And I think Ghost of Tsushima is a good example of taking that, revitalizing it, stripping away the parts that people don't necessarily care too much about, and making it a special event again. I think that we're already going to start to see fatigue on the new iteration of Assassin's Creed. We're now in the sort of third model of it. And I think if they put out another one next year, that's going to be, we're going to have 4 sort of structurally similar new Assassin's Creed games that frankly kind of shoo away from the feeling of being an assassin again. Because instead you're running around with like a level 75 axe. Like it's sort of changed.
So I had a weird revelation, like literally woke me up in the middle of the night and had me sit bolt upright.
Revelation?
No, it wasn't. It was actually a Far Cry revelation. But no, so it hit me that there's the first, like Far Cry 3. I love that game. I adore it. I just rebought it when it was on sale a couple weeks ago, and just jumped back into it. Just like, this is great. I don't know what it is I like about it. And it hit me that the new one is the first one, if you count Blood Dragon, the first one since Blood Dragon or since Far Cry 3 that's just set on an island. And something about that just seems so much more like it's a stupid, like it's a stupid comparison to draw. Like it's very simple, but the idea of, I think, just the world being consolidated on one landmass, as opposed to being like, oh, you're in a valley and there's mountains on the side and you can't go up them. It's just sort of like, why?
You know what? That's a really good way of putting it. Especially, I mean, they did that in Far Cry 5 with Montana. They did it in Primal. They did it in 4 with the Himalayas. They're essentially creating invisible polygonal walls around the player. Whereas in Far Cry 3, there's a narrative excuse, which is if you go too far, you'll drown. But what I like about Far Cry 3 is that you have that massive, like, that massive space to play in, this huge playground. But there's also all these little like inlets and islands all over the place, and they're just pocketed, and there's maybe like one treasure on them. Like it sort of feels like Wind Waker with guns. I kind of dig that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm I say this with most Far Cries where I'm like, I'm cautiously optimistic. I really didn't like 5. Like, I don't know what it was about it. It just, maybe it's the fact that it's just, in America, rooted in American quasi politics, but not really, just at a time when that's not what I want to think about.
Mhm.
But like,
For me, it was like too grounded in its setting of like it played by the rules of what is available in Montana, and that's not super interesting outside of like you don't necessarily get the spectrum of flora and fauna in a situation like that. Like I think Mac, you and I were talking like, oh, maybe if there's like some insane, and this is long before like Tiger King aired, but we're like, what if there was like this insane guy that like lives there and he has like a cocaine zoo or something,
yeah, why not?
And they all broke out. But or we were like, oh, there's a lot of dinosaur bones buried in Montana, right? And the devs were like, yeah, there sure are, but we're not digging them up. I was like, come put the dinosaurs.
Just put dinosaurs in Far Cry, for God's sake, just do it,
right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I'm interested in Valhalla. Like I'm just like I haven't played an Assassin's Creed. I played a bit of Origins, but I've been kind of like, I skipped a generator or I skipped an installment there. So I'm kind of like, I could jump back in there. And like Far Cry, I've been like sort of like lukewarm on in general, but I like love that series when it really clicks. And I'm hoping so much that this next one like does the trick. But yeah, I mean there you go. Like, what is that secret sauce to make a multi-million-dollar quasi formulaic installment in a long running series have enough that's different that it makes it interesting, but enough of the same stuff that it sells, the allotted number of units by Q4 or whatever.
Yeah, that's what Halo is trying to figure out right now.
And in the context of this King Arthur thing, that is coming out now, like all of these series, the one thing I'm looking forward to for the future of Ubisoft is like Ubisoft, like them, hate them, dislike their games, whatever. They're really good at making games, right? They are a world-class studio that does really impressive things with massive teams, whether you like the end product necessarily, I think it's too samey or whatever. Like they are well oiled, right? And hearing things like this King Arthur thing and seeing sort of like the outcry from people about it, justified or not, from like fans, I'm excited to see what a little bit of a kick in the butt in terms of like, Ubisoft, you got to take more risks. You got to diversify what you're doing in terms of the experiences and how they change and how they're different from each other. Like I'm excited to see where that goes. Not necessarily saying, okay, it's going to be a slam dunk. Everything they're going to make is going to be innovative and perfect. But like, I'm just interested to see what a huge studio like that is going to do after this kind of like much needed cleanup.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the difficult thing about working about like a game studio of that size is that you often have these sort of staggered releases in development concurrently. And so like an Assassin's Creed game is being worked on and about to ship at the same time as another Assassin's Creed game might be 6 months or a year into development. And so if there are lessons to be learned, it's hard to course correct them. It's hard to steer a ship with 1,000 people on it, like I think that's where it gets kind of tricky, especially if it's Skull and Bones, because I don't even know where that ship is steering. But I think that's where it gets kind of difficult. And I think that's where a smaller studio gets the sort of ability to be a little bit more nimble. Is if you look at, not to keep bringing up Sucker Punch, but they're, from what we know, solely focused on one game right now, one franchise. And so I think it's easier for them to kind of adjust and ebb and flow based on what they like and what the audience likes and doesn't like. Whereas like something like Watch Dogs, like how far in that is into development is that alongside the new Assassin's Creed game? And then they end up launching a week and a half from each other, which is also like a week and a half from Cyberpunk. And all of a sudden you have this cluster F word. You could probably say it, doesn't matter, about 3 different, giant massive open world games competing at the same time. And like when we did the episode with Mitchell Saltzman, who played Assassin's Creed right after playing Ghost of Tsushima, and he was like that, it felt like whiplash, like going from the combat in Ghost to Assassin's Creed. And Max, you're one of the people that's played both. Like it's tough to kind of bounce around between those things. So like they can't really adjust a game of that size with that development studio of that caliber that quickly. when there's so much at stake and there's so many people there. It's hard to really come in with creativity. And so you sort of see why like somebody comes in with this like revolutionary rogue new idea and it gets shot out of the sky by some like company figurehead who maybe hasn't even visited the studio in a year and a half. Like everything is just too big, you know?
Yeah. Anyway, there's too many games out there and we're all playing some of them. So Brian, what are you playing these days?
I'm just about done with Carrion, which is a sort of 2D pixel art Metroidvania where you play as a monster that escaped from the lab. So it's sort of like a reverse horror game. You play as the bad guy. I love this game. It has some of my favorite player movement that I've ever experienced in a 2D game. You're basically the creature from The Thing, blood red, covered in tentacles and teeth, gnashing and big eyeballs and everything like that. And the more scientists, soldiers, and gunk you eat up, the bigger you get and the grosser you get, and you get more powers and stuff like that. I was madly in love with this game until the last hour or so. One of the biggest issues with this game, which wasn't really a problem for me until the very, very end, is that it lacks a map. There's no map. And so if you're like me and you play Metroidvania games, you love them and have been playing them your whole life, you know that like 100%ing that map is like a big part of it. But it exists to kind of nudge you along to the next place you need to go. I can't remember a game I played since Metroid 2 for the Game Boy that I was like this in love with, but also simultaneously this frustrated with. I'm at the very, very end of this game. I probably have like one more door to go through, and I'm not sure where it is. So I'm just looping all over the map as this giant blood octopus. There's nothing left to eat because I've killed everyone. There's nothing left to do, and so I'm just like searching.
Oh, that's a bummer to hear. I'm also playing this. I'm a little bit behind you, but yeah, I definitely know that is a problem where like games that don't have a map. Like my logic was like, oh, you're like a giant pulsating blob of tentacles and like blood matter. Like, why would you have a map? Like, what would that be? You'd have like some sort of sonar, which you do. But yeah, I think like I remember I never finished Fez because like that game kind of collapsed in the same way where you have a weird map in that game, but using it in an actual like cartographical sense is like very it's not user friendly, you know. It's more like an aesthetic choice, and it's like occasionally you do need to backtrack and figure out where you're supposed to go. So maps are useful like that.
I will say your mileage may vary. I still really recommend this game, and I think that if I had just like made a right instead of a left towards the very end, I might have just finished it and been like, oh, that's one of my favorite games in years. Because I was so close to just like declaratively saying this is a phenomenal A+ video game, and now I'm kind of like A-, B+, and that's kind of a bummer.
No, I'm definitely digging that game too, though. It's also like I like that it's simple and it's short and it shuts up. Like it's compared to so many giant sprawling open world games. Tom, what are you playing?
I've been finally able to start playing controller games again after my arms kind of been hurting me the last month or so. So I put about 8 or 9 hours into The Last of Us 2 finally over this weekend. This is the first time I've played it. Like I literally have been waiting. I haven't been spoiled yet. I'm very excited about it. And I'm really enjoying it, man. I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked about this little indie game called The Last of Us a lot recently, but like, yeah, I'm just very happy to be into it. And it's interesting to me how much it feels like riding a bike in terms of, because I only played the first one for the first time, like 4 months ago, something like that. I can't even remember anymore. What is time?
Yeah, you're not going to forget how to ride a bike in 4 months. Definitely.
But it just feels like there's so much new about it. But like it feels very, very one in a really cool, appealing way. It feels like coming home a little bit in that regard, and I'm just having a blast with it right now.
Yeah, I'm actually, I find that fascinating that you just played the first one a few months ago, because I think that removed a lot of the sort of expectations that I think people kind of built up in their brains over years over what they wanted to see and what they wanted from those characters. And I don't blame them for that because, you know, obviously people, I feel like people feel a sort of sense of ownership over characters that they controlled and spend 20, 30, 40, 50 hours with, depending on how many times they played through the game. And so obviously, you know, sequels are difficult because there's always going to be expectations. I mean, if you look at the sort of critical reaction to Empire Strikes Back when it first came out, which wildly deviated from the original in many, many ways. It was kind of split. And so that said, I think it's if you played through the first 9 hours and you're loving it, then you've already pushed past a lot of the stuff that I think people didn't like about it. And yeah,
really?
So yeah. I mean,
I've been avoiding, apart from Jonathan's review, like and like another a couple other reviews here and there. Like I've really been avoiding like the conversation because I just don't want to get spoiled. And like nothing in the game so far has stuck out to me as like offensive, but also nothing in the game has stuck out to me as like I don't know, like super, super crazy, amazing new, right? Like it just feels like a really good follow up to a game I really, really liked. To the point where even like I really liked the open world stuff. It didn't kind of overstay its welcome, although there might be more. Like I don't really know, right? Like it just I'm just enjoying it right now.
Yeah, no, I think Naughty Dog kind of came closest to finding the secret sauce on their sort of like foray into open world exploration.
Yeah.
In this game, and I think it did something that some of my favorite open-ish world games do, which is like funnel you through specific areas, but then also give you like larger areas to play around in for a little while. I think that's great. I think Uncharted 4 didn't really nail that correctly. The world was gorgeous and it was
Lost
big.
Legacy did a great job with it.
Yes.
And this feels like this felt like a good kind of like follow-up to that. Although fundamentally I don't really like the idea. I don't know. That's another conversation we can have time. But the one thing that annoys me about Naughty Dog's open worlds is that it then trains you to check every single corner of every single space, and like there's not always a ton of reason to once you leave that open world area. So that's like the one thing that I don't like about that design conceptually, but I still enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. As I was kind of at odds with that too, but then on the flip side, like Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite games, and I'm the idiot that runs in every room and knifes every box and every barrel, and like
that's how you play.
Quick turning, picking up every dollar bill off the floor.
Yeah, I tried to get into Last of Us, and it just didn't hook me, and I like completely recognize it as like a really well made video game, and I appreciate it. It's just like I don't know. It was like when you don't want to eat your favorite food, like you're just like, I don't, and it.
No, I feel that.
Yeah.
This is really quickly. This is the really funny thing to me. When I played the first Last of Us way back when it came out, it was too like dark and like oppressive. And I know that was what it was going for, but like, I just like wasn't enjoying it, which is why it took me so long to actually play through the full game. But like now playing Last of Us 2 after having just played through The Last of Us, like I heard all these people being like, man, this game is so depressing. This game is so hard. It's so gory and brutal. And I'm like 9 hours into it. I'm like, yeah, this is just like what the first one was. Like this is like my expectations are totally in line for what this was going to be. And it's like, none of that is bothering me in the slightest.
Yeah. I also I will get totally burnt out on something if there's just too much discourse around it. Like I'll just get like, I remember I always think of, this is a weird comparison. The 2003 Hulk movie directed by Ang Lee with Eric Bana. Not really a good movie by any stretch of the imagination. I just remember like by the time I saw it, I was like sick of the branding because it was on cereal boxes, it was on toys, it was everywhere, and I just was like, it was like I think like Star Wars Episode 1 had a similar thing where there was just this like inundation of just this sort of aesthetic everywhere, and this like just sort of being too aware of it, and there was no sense of it being like this new discovery. And we talked about like the first Last of Us was such like a insane kind of gut punch because it was it came sort of hot on the tail of like a bunch of like just a lot of zombie stuff, but it was doing enough of its own thing, and it was totally singular, but it was also a surprise. And then this time around it's like, well, it's The Last of Us Part 2, it's full of surprises, it's got new stuff in there, but no matter what it's doing, it's still more The Last of Us, and apparently The Last of Us wasn't the last of them because there's more of them, but I don't know, it's a weird, it's just hey,
check out Final Fantasy.
Yeah. No, there you go.
So interesting thing about this, it was revealed recently that just a few days ago that The Last of Us Part 2 has a 50% completion rate from players, which is insane. Like, to put that in perspective, that is one of the highest completion rates for a single player game pretty much ever. Like that's kind of unheard of, especially for a game that, borders on 20-25 hours. And also, like, if you looked at the discourse online, you would think is one of the most divisive video games ever made. I honestly think a lot of that is when you remove, people like us being like 10 out of 10, best thing ever, and then other people being like 0 out of 10, I hate it. What you get is a lot of just average consumers who go in and they're like, wow, that was cool.
I think it's this interesting balance of like being a really good video game that's also really accessible, both in terms of like what the subject matter is, what the stakes are, how to play it. Like it's not overly complicated or like stupidly obtuse. It's got a ton of actual accessibility options. And it's like just that right balance of like, here's a movie and here's gameplay. And I think people who are like super into like weird new emergent gameplay systems are like, this is too rudimentary. But you take somebody who doesn't play every brand new massive AAA open world game or isn't like, ride or die for FromSoft and like getting their ass kicked. Like maybe it's like just the right amount of like, oh yeah, I can get into this. I've recommended The Last of Us to like in-laws, where they're like, oh, you know about video games? Like, what's a cool new thing I should play? And I'm like, you play The Last of Us? Because it's like one of the best games of the last 10 years. They're like, I'll check it out. And then like my wife doesn't, like she plays games here and there. Like she loved the first Last of Us. She burned through this one and she gets like horribly motion sick, but she was playing it with like that weird contrast mode, which helped a ton. And she was super happy about it. And like just in the first like 10 minutes of the game, she was like, oh my God, look at that snow. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I that snow's pretty good, but they had the same snow in like God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn and Death Stranding. And then I was like, oh, I'm insufferable. like if you don't play every single game that comes out, like this is probably an exciting new thing that's like way easier to be. Yeah. And I mean, that's, that's something to keep in mind.
They put crazy ad dollars behind it too. I mean, so you could see commercials for this thing everywhere. And so I will say too, and I've been saying this a lot, gameplay wise, it's pretty straightforward if you want it to be, but there is a ton of room for crazy creativity and combat in this game and stealth and just the way you handle conflicts. I don't know if you guys follow that dude Sunhee Legend on Twitter. He's basically like a mastermind at clipping out just incredible, impeccable, high level gameplay GIFs. He's going through Ghost of Tsushima right now. Sucker Punch hooked him up with an early copy to just let him just really go to town. And like I walked through that game being like, I'm awesome at this game. I platinum it and like we nailed it. Awesome, great, I'm great. And then I watched his videos and like I didn't even know you could do that. Like he's doing stuff like he'll jump kick a guy in the air, shoot 3 arrows, bullet time, throw a smoke bomb at another guy, land and like slit 3 throats. And I'm like, what? Really?
Damn.
So yeah, he was doing stuff in The Last of Us that I'm like, I didn't even know you could get the drop on dudes from like a higher level, and like there's all this stuff that he's doing. So yeah, follow him. And yeah, if you play through that game and you're just kind of like throwing bricks and shooting guns, poke around and get a little creative with it. I think the multiplayer is going to be really fascinating because there's a lot of systems at play there, and I think they're going to pull out some really cool shit.
Anyway, we've been going a little bit long here, but thank you for joining us. You can find us all on Twitter. I'm Max Scoville, Brian is Agent Bizzle, and Tom is Tom R. Marks. Is that right?
Yep.
What's the R for?
I can't tell you.
That's been a mystery.
If I told
Tom
you
registered trade Marks.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, thank you all for joining us. I got a chuckle out of you.
That's so good. We've been doing this stupid bit where we try to come up with his name and the audience is so sick of it. They're like, I don't want to hear about the R anymore, but you just put new life in it.
It's like the best part is it's not a secret at all. You could probably anybody with Google in 5 minutes could find out. It's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not good at that. Anyway, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. Hopefully Jonathan's back. He can clean up this mess. I'm sorry if my brain's leaking out my
good.
ears.
Shut up.
It's fine. We did Comic-Con all weekend. We're tired. I want to take a nap.
So you're sharp as attack. You know what you're
sharp as attack.
Getting out there.
If you want more of me and Brian being extra stupid, we're going to be doing a very stupid up at noon on Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific this week, where we talk about toys, dolls, collectibles, figurines, action figures, and little tiny totems.
And that will be right after I'm hosting like a 4-hour long celebrity charity live stream in Animal Crossing. which I understand is not a PlayStation game, but I'm visiting several people who are PlayStation adjacent, such as Greg Miller and Laura Bailey, who was in The Last of Us. And Greg Miller was not he was probably in The Last of Us. He's probably one of the shirtless zombies dead in a ditch somewhere, something like that. But yeah, I think you'll enjoy it.
Good. Tom, is there anything you've been working on you want to share?
Nope.
Oh, well, all right then. We'll let you go about your business then. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, that's the end of the show. It is over now. The end. The end is it's over.
Beyond.
Goodbye. Beyond.